Hi, I'm Rebecca Darley, and I'm incredibly excited to be joining ANAMED this year as a fellow. I'm a Byzantinist and a scholar of medieval coinage, and for me that means there really couldn't be anywhere better than Istanbul to spend 9 months. Its sites, its collections, and density of expertise, both at Koç University and around the city, are unparalleled. And this is something that I'm really looking forward to immersing myself in. My project intentionally leverages those collections as much as possible, as well as the amazing library resources that are available. But in order to explain why I'm doing what I'm doing, I'd like to take you back a little bit further into the journey that got me here. So I first began studying Byzantium and the Middle Ages as an undergraduate and then a postgraduate student at the universities of Cambridge and then Birmingham at the Centre for Byzantine, Ottoman and Modern Greek Studies. It was quite early in this journey that I got into coins. In fact, I vividly remember the first time I ever held a Byzantine coin. It was a copper coin from the reign of Justinian I. And I had this physical sensation of being in contact with the past in some way. And to this day, I think coins are the most remarkable body of sources for the closeness and the variety of insights they give us into the lives of people in the past. They're quite unusual in that they can speak to us both of high politics, of the rise and fall of empires, of battles won and lost. But at the same time, they can give us this very everyday view into the lives of people who were buying bread, making the rent, pursuing the everyday victories and fears that motivate all of us every day of our lives. A small hoard of low value hidden in a wall in a time of trouble, or the scatter of coins in a marketplace site, can all give us insights into lives that are otherwise quite hard to reach through the sources that often remain to us from the Middle Ages. And for my doctoral research, I started out studying Byzantine coins, so coins minted under what to them was the Roman Empire, but which we often conventionally refer to as the Byzantine Empire from around the 4th to 6th centuries, minted in Constantinople, but found in South India. And I started out looking at these as evidence of trade, but as my project developed, I became much more interested in them as evidence for how people react to coins when they are outside the area for which they were created. How did people understand the way they looked or the ways that they might be used? And I also became interested in a set of behaviours that people exhibit around coins that are actually very common. Things like using them in jewellery, scratching things into the bare areas of them, or depositing them in ways that don't look economic, that appear to be either ritual or indeed purely personal. From there, I moved to the University of London, first as a postdoctoral student in a project looking through the lens of Abi Warburg's work at art historical approaches to multiple sources, and then as a member of faculty at Birkbeck. And here I obviously added insights from art historical approaches to these questions of how people think and thought about coin imagery, how images move and are translated and adjusted in different contexts. But I also had the wonderful opportunity to work with the collections at the British Museum, which was just next door, and with students. And the combination of these two things was fantastically insightful. Guiding lots of other people through perhaps the first time they're handling ancient and medieval coins is a wonderful way to see what people notice and what they don't, the things people question and the things that seem obvious. For a start, most people do recognise ancient and medieval coins as coins, and that itself is something worth unpicking. What is it that makes a coin coin-like? But people would also ask me questions about things that the literature does not consider important and that I had never noticed, while perhaps passing over things that I and the wider literature might be obsessed with. So that really got me thinking more deeply about these questions of audience, intention and response. Then in 2020, I was awarded a Wolfson Fellowship to work on my first major monograph, which is a reinterpretation of the history of the Western Indian Ocean in the first millennium. CE, that is. And for me, as a Byzantinist, this is a story that very much involves the Eastern Mediterranean and Anatolia. I see the Eastern Mediterranean as being part of a cultural arc that, at least over the course of that first millennium CE, links together everywhere from sort of the Aegean Sea right through to the coast of what is now South India and Sri Lanka. But it wasn't a story that I wanted to tell about objects and people moving. It wasn't a trade story. Instead, it was the story of how big alterations in how people conceived of things like statehood, membership, inclusion, and indeed exclusion worked over 1,000 years. And money, of course, was an important lens through which I viewed both the story I was trying to tell and the sources that I was using. And this really opened me up to questions about what a numismatic method is, what makes the study of coins distinctive from the ways other experts handle their material, but also questions about the nature of money. How do we actually imagine money, and how has that been done in the past? And it's really all of these layers of question and the confronting of assumptions that brought me to the project that I'm planning to pursue at ANAMED. And it's really a project that couldn't have been done, I think, anywhere else. Because medieval Anatolia and the work that has now been enabled over the past few decades on medieval Anatolia by the incredible work done into its medieval numismatic history is unlike anywhere else. It is a fantastic laboratory for numismatic history. And that is because, in sum, what it set up was a confrontation or a meeting point between two of the most influential traditions in the making of money in human history, and a space in between. And it's the spaces in between where very often the interesting things happen. So at one end of the Anatolian Peninsula, for most of the Middle Ages, is the Byzantine, or functionally the Roman, tradition of making money. Now, this didn't remain unchanged across all of that time, but it very much built on a tradition that was centuries old by the time my project begins in around the 4th century CE, and which remained fairly stable because the reasons why it existed in that way and the technologies used to create it remained quite stable across that time. So denominations did not change that much, and when they did, it was quite slowly. The metals used, again, stayed fairly similar, and the idea of how coins ought to look also remained fairly stable. At the other end of the Anatolian plateau, from the 7th century onwards, we see the emergence of something really quite remarkable in monetary history, which is an entirely innovative system of coinage, what comes to be the standard across large parts of the Islamic world thereafter, which is a new set of weights and denominations, but also a new appearance for coins, without images, with inscriptions only. And in between, in the Middle Ages, many different polities, including small kingdoms, sultanates, chancers looking for an opportunity, subdivisions of those larger regional blocks, all had the chance to express themselves through their own local coinages. Some of these lasted a long time, some of them did not. Some of them issued in gold and silver, some only in copper alloy. But their choices were remarkable for being highly creative. Some took elements of design from both the broadly Islamic tradition to the east and the broadly Roman tradition to the west and blended them together. Others chose one but put their own unique cultural spin on it. Some picked up imagery and designs of coins from centuries earlier and brought them back into circulation when they would have been unfamiliar to the places where they had originally been invented. And it's that I really want to explore over the course of this project, a unique opportunity to go back to those big questions in my own research and to ask, can we assume that coins were propaganda? And if we can, how did people react to them? How do we understand the ways in which people thought about their own monetary traditions? And what does any of this tell us about the way we communicate with each other today?